Somewhere in the blackest parts of the ocean, where sunlight has never touched and pressure is strong enough to crush steel like paper, something ancient is still alive, and it has no interest in evolving into something more familiar, more comfortable, or more understandable. It doesn't look like the sharks you know. It doesn't move like them either. In fact, if you saw it without context, you might not even believe it belongs to this planet at all. The frilled shark is not just unusual, it is disturbingly out of place, like a creature that slipped through time and refused to change. And that's because, in many ways, it didn't. While most life on Earth has spent hundreds of millions of years adapting, refining, and optimizing itself for survival in a constantly changing world, this thing simply stayed the same. It watched entire ecosystems rise and collapse, witnessed mass extinctions wipe out dominant species, and yet it remained, silent, patient, unchanged, lurking in the depths like a biological ghost. To understand why the frilled shark feels so wrong, you have to forget everything you think you know about sharks. When most people imagine a shark, they picture something streamlined, powerful, fast, an apex predator built for efficiency. But the frilled shark breaks every one of those expectations. Its body is long and eel-like, almost serpentine, stretching up to 2 meters in length with a flexibility that feels more reptilian than fish-like. Its skin is dark, almost black, blending seamlessly into the void it inhabits. And then there's its head, flattened, primitive, and unsettlingly simple, as if evolution just stopped trying. But the most disturbing feature isn't its shape. It's its mouth. Unlike most sharks, whose jaws sit neatly beneath the snout, the frilled shark's mouth is positioned at the very front of its face, terminal and wide, giving it an almost permanently open, almost curious expression. Except it isn't curiosity. It's readiness. Inside that mouth are over 300 teeth, arranged in 25 rows, each one needle-sharp and curved backward like tiny hooks designed not just to cut, but to trap. Once something enters that mouth, there is no easy escape. These teeth don't just bite, they hold, they grip, they ensure. And the frilled shark doesn't need to chase its prey like modern sharks do. It doesn't rely on speed or brute force. Instead, it waits. It drifts. It exists in a state of quiet patience, conserving energy in an environment where food is scarce and every movement matters. When the moment comes, it doesn't strike like a torpedo, it lunges like a snake. This is where things start to feel even more unnatural. Most sharks attack with a burst of speed, using powerful tails to close the distance between themselves and their prey. But the frilled shark seems to borrow a completely different strategy, one that feels eerily similar to land predators. It coils its body, storing potential energy, and then suddenly snaps forward, capturing prey in a rapid, almost elastic motion. It's not just a fish, it behaves like something that shouldn't be in water at all. Scientists have compared this movement to that of a striking snake, and the resemblance is difficult to ignore. It's as if evolution briefly experimented with a completely different blueprint, and then abandoned it, leaving this creature behind as a living relic of what could have been. But perhaps the strangest thing about the frilled shark isn't how it hunts or how it looks, it's where it lives. It inhabits depths between 500 and 1,500 meters, a region of the ocean often referred to as the twilight zone, where light barely penetrates and life exists in a strange, suspended state between abundance and starvation. Down here, the rules are different. Time feels slower. Movements are deliberate. Survival depends not on dominance, but on efficiency. And the frilled shark fits into this world perfectly, not because it adapted to it recently, but because it has always been this way. Fossil evidence suggests that sharks similar to the frilled shark existed over 80 million years ago, during a time when dinosaurs still walked the earth. That alone is enough to make it extraordinary. But what's even more unsettling is how little it has changed since then. While other species evolved, diversified, and specialized, the frilled shark remained almost identical to its ancient ancestors. It is what scientists call a living fossil, a term that sounds almost poetic, but carries a deeper implication. It means that this creature found a design so effective, so perfectly suited to its environment, that evolution had no reason to alter it. It reached a kind of biological equilibrium, where change was unnecessary. And in a world defined by constant adaptation, that kind of stillness is almost unnatural. Encounters with frilled sharks are incredibly rare, not because they are mythical, but because they live so far beyond our reach. Most of what we know about them comes from accidental catches, deep-sea fishing operations pulling up something they never intended to find. When these sharks are brought to the surface, something strange happens. They don't thrash violently like other sharks. They don't panic. Instead, they move slowly, almost lethargically, as if the world above is too bright, too loud, too overwhelming. Their bodies, adapted for crushing pressure and near-total darkness, begin to fail in this alien environment. It's like watching a creature from another dimension struggling to exist in ours. And yet, despite how alien it feels, the frilled shark is very real. It is not a monster, not a myth, not a relic trapped in stone. It is alive, right now, moving through the depths with the same quiet purpose it has carried for millions of years. It doesn't need to evolve into something more efficient, because it already is. It doesn't need to compete in the chaotic ecosystems of shallow waters, because it exists in a world where competition is minimal and survival is a matter of patience rather than power. It is, in every sense, perfectly adapted to a part of Earth that we barely understand. But this raises a deeper, more unsettling question. If something like the frilled shark can exist, unchanged, unnoticed, and so fundamentally different from everything we're familiar with, then what else is down there? What other creatures have followed completely different evolutionary paths, shaped not by the same pressures that created life on land and in shallow seas, but by something far more extreme? The deep ocean is the largest habitat on this planet, and we have explored only a fraction of it. Every time we send cameras into the darkness, we find something new, something that challenges our understanding of life itself. The frilled shark is not just an anomaly. It's a reminder. A reminder that evolution doesn't always move forward in ways we expect. Sometimes, it finds something that works, and simply stops. And in the silent, crushing depths of the ocean, where time seems to stretch endlessly and change comes slowly, that decision can echo for millions of years. If the frilled shark feels like a mistake in the timeline of evolution, it's because nearly every detail of its biology operates on rules that diverge sharply from what we recognize as modern shark design, and the deeper scientists look into its anatomy and behavior, the more it begins to resemble a living blueprint from an earlier version of Earth, one where survival was less about speed and dominance, and more about patience, efficiency, and mechanical precision in a world where energy was rare and every movement had to be justified. At the core of this strangeness is its skeletal structure, which is far less calcified than that of most contemporary sharks, giving its body an almost soft, flexible quality that allows it to move with an eerie fluidity, bending and coiling in ways that feel more serpentine than piscine, and this flexibility isn't just for show, it's a functional adaptation that enables its unique hunting strategy, one that doesn't rely on pursuit, but on sudden, controlled bursts of motion that transform stillness into violence in a fraction of a second. Unlike fast-swimming predators that burn through energy reserves in short, explosive chases, the frilled shark operates on a completely different economy, conserving energy for long periods as it drifts through the water column, its movements so minimal they almost disappear into the background of the deep-sea environment, waiting for prey to come close enough that escape becomes mathematically improbable. And when that moment arrives, the mechanics of its attack reveal something even more unusual, because the frilled shark doesn't simply open its jaws and bite, it creates a rapid expansion of its mouth cavity, generating a suction force that pulls prey inward, a feeding method known as suction predation, which is relatively rare among sharks but highly effective in the low-visibility, low-energy conditions of the deep ocean. And combined with its backward curving teeth, this creates a one-way system where prey, often squid or small fish, is drawn in and then physically prevented from escaping, turning the shark's mouth into something closer to a biological trap than a traditional biting instrument. Its diet, heavily dominated by cephalopods, further reinforces this idea of specialization, because squid themselves are highly elusive, fast-reacting organisms, capable of jet propulsion and rapid directional changes, meaning that any predator relying on speed alone would struggle to catch them in such an environment, but the frilled shark strategy bypasses this entirely by reducing the need for a chase, instead relying on proximity, timing, and a sudden manipulation of water pressure that turns the prey's own environment against it. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the frilled shark's biology isn't how it hunts, it's how it reproduces, because here, once again, it diverges dramatically from what we consider normal, even among sharks, many of which already have unusual reproductive strategies. The frilled shark is ovoviviparous, meaning that embryos develop inside eggs that remain within the mother's body until they hatch, after which the young are born live. But what makes this process extraordinary is its duration, because the gestation period of the frilled shark is estimated to be anywhere between 3 to possibly over 3.5 years. making it one of the longest gestation periods of any vertebrate known to science, a time frame that seems almost incompatible with the fast-paced reproductive cycles seen in most marine species. This extended development period suggests an environment where reproductive opportunities are scarce, and where investing heavily in a smaller number of well-developed offspring provides a greater chance of survival than producing large quantities of vulnerable young, and it also reflects the slow, deliberate pace of life in the deep sea, where everything, from movement to growth to reproduction, operates on a stretched timeline that feels disconnected from the rhythms of the surface world. Inside the mother, embryos sustain themselves initially through yolk sacs, but as development continues, they may absorb additional unfertilized eggs in a process known as oophagy, effectively consuming potential siblings as a source of nutrition, a behavior that, while brutal by human standards, represents a highly efficient way to ensure that the strongest individuals receive the resources they need to fully develop in an environment where external food sources are unpredictable at best, and, by the time they are born, these young sharks are already relatively large and well-formed, capable of surviving independently in a world where parental care does not exist. This entire reproductive strategy underscores a recurring theme in the frilled shark's biology. Nothing is wasted, nothing is rushed, and every aspect of its existence is tuned to maximize survival in conditions where mistakes are rarely forgiven. Even its sensory systems reflect this same philosophy of efficiency and adaptation, because in the near-total darkness of its habitat, vision becomes less reliable, forcing a greater dependence on other senses that can operate effectively without light, and like other sharks, the frilled shark possesses specialized electroreceptors known as ampullae of Lorenzini, which allow it to detect the faint electrical signals produced by the muscle movements of nearby organisms, effectively giving it a way to see in complete darkness by interpreting the bioelectric fields around it. But what makes this particularly important in the context of the frilled shark is how it integrates with its hunting strategy, because detecting prey is only part of the equation. The real advantage comes from being able to position itself with precision before initiating that sudden suction-based strike, minimizing wasted effort and maximizing the likelihood of a successful capture. And then there's its metabolism, which operates at a slower rate compared to many shallow-water predators, a necessary adjustment in an environment where food can be sporadic and energy conservation is critical, allowing the frilled shark to endure long periods without feeding, drifting through the depths in a state that might appear passive, but is in reality a carefully balanced strategy of survival, one that prioritizes endurance over aggression and patience over dominance. This slow metabolism also contributes to its overall behavior, which can seem almost lethargic when observed, especially in the rare instances where individuals are brought to the surface, but in its natural environment, this apparent sluggishness is not a worry. It is an advantage, a way of existing that aligns perfectly with the scarcity and unpredictability of deep-sea ecosystems. What begins to emerge from all of this is a picture of a creature that is not simply primitive, as it is often described, but rather highly specialized in a direction that most life on Earth never needed to explore, a direction shaped by darkness, pressure, and isolation, where the traditional markers of evolutionary success, speed, strength, competition, are replaced by a different set of priorities entirely, and this is what makes the frilled shark so unsettling to us, because it challenges our assumptions about what it means to be well-adapted, forcing us to confront the idea that evolution does not have a single trajectory, but can branch into forms that feel alien, even when they are entirely natural. And yet, despite all this understanding, there is still something about the frilled shark that resists full explanation, something that lingers in the way it moves, the way it feeds, the way it exists in a part of the world we can barely access, as if it belongs to a version of Earth that we no longer fully recognize, and maybe that's because, in a very real sense, it does, a survivor from a time when the rules were different, still playing a game that the rest of life has long since moved on. From deep beneath the surface, where the past is not something that has been left behind, but something that is still very much alive. In a world that measures success through dominance, speed, and constant adaptation, the frilled shark presents something far more difficult to understand. An organism that survived not by becoming better, but by refusing to change at all, and as strange as that sounds, it forces us to confront a deeper truth about evolution itself. That progress is not always forward, and survival is not always about becoming more advanced, but sometimes about finding a balance so precise that change becomes unnecessary. For over 80 million years, through shifting oceans, changing climates, and mass extinctions that erased entire lineages from existence, the frilled shark endured, not as a ruler of its environment, but as a quiet participant in a system that never demanded more from it than what it already was, and that kind of stability is almost unsettling when viewed through the lens of human understanding, because it suggests that in some corners of this planet, time does not flow in the same way we perceive it, it stretches, slows, and in some cases, nearly stands still. But survival, no matter how refined, is never guaranteed, and even a creature as perfectly adapted as the frilled shark is not immune to the changes now rippling through the deep ocean, because for the first time in its incredibly long existence, the threats it faces are not natural, not part of the slow, predictable cycles it evolved to endure, but sudden, external, and largely invisible forces driven by human activity far above the surface. Deep-sea fishing, once limited by technology, has begun to reach into the very depths where the frilled shark resides, unintentionally pulling these ancient animals into a world they were never meant to encounter, and while they are rarely targeted directly, even accidental capture can have devastating consequences for a species that reproduces so slowly, where the loss of even a few individuals can echo across generations. At the same time, shifting ocean temperatures and changing chemical compositions, driven by climate change, are beginning to alter deep-sea ecosystems in ways we are only just starting to understand, subtly reshaping the delicate balance that has allowed creatures like the frilled shark to remain unchanged for millions of years. And yet, perhaps the most profound impact is not physical, but existential, because the more we explore the deep ocean, the more we begin to realize how little we actually know about it, and how many forms of life exist beyond the boundaries of our everyday awareness, each one following its own evolutionary path, shaped by conditions so different from our own that they might as well belong to another planet. The frilled shark is not just a biological curiosity, it is a symbol of that vast unknown, a reminder that Earth is still full of mysteries that challenge our assumptions and expand our understanding of what life can be. It exists in darkness, moves with a quiet precision, and carries within its form a story that stretches back to a time long before humans, before mammals, before even the modern shape of the continents themselves. And maybe that's why it feels so unsettling to look at, because when we see the frilled shark, we are not just seeing an animal, we are seeing a fragment of deep time, a living connection to an ancient world that still persists beneath our feet, hidden in the crushing depths of the ocean, where evolution took a different path and never looked back. It doesn't need to be faster, or smarter, or more aggressive, because it already solved the problem of survival in its own way, long before we ever existed to question it. In the end, the frilled shark doesn't just challenge our understanding of biology, it challenges our perspective on existence itself, forcing us to consider that life is not defined by constant change, but by the ability to endure, to find a place in the world where the rules align perfectly with your nature, and to remain there, unchanged, while everything else moves on. And somewhere, far below the reach of sunlight, in a silence that has lasted for millions of years, it still drifts, unchanged, unseen, and entirely indifferent to the passage of time.